I am all ready to put together my Limelight block. I have all of my flying geese and half square triangles trimmed up and ready to go. So I'm going to lay it out and walk you through how I glue based all of the rows together. And then we'll sew together all the rows, then assemble the full block. And as I'm going through that process, I'll walk you through each step, let you know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think you're going to be really happy with the results that you get as well. So let's get started with laying this out. These guys go out around here. Let's move this so you can see better. And then our next flying geese go right around here. And our center on this board just fits it so nicely. All right, it's coming together. And then these guys go here. And here, and here. Oh, can you see it? Doesn't it look great? And then these little guys go here, here, another corner, another corner, and then these little ladies go here. So I like to lay out my blocks like this before I glue base them, just to make sure I have everything right where it belongs. I make mistakes too, just like everybody else, but when something is glue basted before you start sewing it, it can be easier to find those mistakes and fix them more easily than after they're sewn and then you have to unsew. So this is what your block will look a little bit like, depending on the fabrics that you've chosen. We're going to put this together in rows, so these are all of our rows. And then we will join the rows into a big block. So what I'm going to do is glue baste each piece together. So I'll have a whole row glue basted together before I head to the machine. When every row is glue basted together before sewing, it makes chain piecing these guys so much easier and faster and efficient. And you don't have to worry about rotating a block accidentally and having it rotated the wrong direction inside of the block, then having to take it out. So we will glue baste those, and I'll walk you through the first steps, and then I'll kind of just go through all of it. You'll probably see the video and a little bit of fast forward while I do that. Then we'll get sewing this together. So when I'm doing a row, I line them up right next to each other just as they're going to be pieced. So I drew that line of glue just like I did on previous pieces, and right on the inside of that 1/4 inch, about an 1/8 inch. Then I take that piece that I just glue basted and I fold it over just like I did here. And then I put my line of glue. I'll take my next piece, line up the corners. Also with this, with this specific one, I want to make sure I line up these seams, these 45 degree diagonal seams. That'll make a nice matching point. Now, as I'm looking at this, I see it's hard for you to probably see me back here. So I'm going to go ahead and stack my rows. And you can do this too, just for ease and convenience at home. So let's get these stacked. All right, we'll move this to the middle so you can see it a bit better. All right, so then I'll make sure I heat set that. Fold that one over. Put that glue on there, and you can see that really nicely on the red. Line up that 45 degree angle. That's really important. Almost more important than making sure these edges are matched, because if that 45 degree angle is matched, then your piece will come together rather than having that point be off. And then the last one of that row, and this row is ready to sew. And now see how when it's laid out like this, you can make sure that everything is arranged, rotated in the correct orientation before you sew it. So this one's ready to go. I'll set it up off to the side, get my next row, and they're stacked in order, so I should be able to just take one off the top and just keep glue basting like I did the previous row. Right now at the flying geese, same thing. We are not matching the intersections of our flying geese, so you don't have to worry about matching those up too much. Just get those flying geese aligned and squared up. In any place that you might find a shortage, if you can see here, I was a little short on that tip, but this part is square. That shortage will be absorbed in the seam allowance, so I am not going to worry about it at all. I'm not going to try and stretch it and get it to fit. It'll be just fine. Oops. Didn't put enough glue on that one. Right, now all of our rows are ready to piece. Let's lay it out just to make sure I got everything where it belongs. Oh, I can see one is coming off over here, so I'm going to fix that up real quick. Right, so everything looks great. It's all laid out just like I want it to be. Now I'm going to take all of my rows to my sewing machine. I'm just going to chain piece them. First seam in each row, second seam, third and fourth seam in each row. Now this one thing I am going to do at the machine, and I'll talk about it, walk you through it there, is I will be stopping and starting at the 1/4 inch down on each end of the seam and back stitching. What that is going to allow me to do is nest and spin my seams so that the back has less bulk and the seams are nice and secure and they look really beautiful. So let's go ahead and head over to the machine and I will get this put together. All of my rows are ready to sew. I am going to go ahead and chain piece these. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, I am going to nest and spin my seams. So what I need to do to be able to get them to spin properly is stop and backstitch my sewing at the 1/4 inch mark. Now this specific row is an edge. It goes on the outside edge. So I don't have to backstitch at this top edge seam where it's going to go into a sashing. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. If you don't want to keep track of which rows are what, then you can backstitch it every single 1/4 of an inch. So what that looks like is this. And you know, I get mixed feedback. And usually it's mixed because people haven't tried it. Once you try it, then you'll be able to see the usefulness, how great your seams look. So I suggest giving it a try. Feel free to ask me any questions you want. Why am I crazy enough to do this? Does it take extra time? Well, the thing with the taking of extra time is everything is in preparation. If you prepare everything, getting your pieces sewn together will be more efficient. So spinning our seams here makes quilting easier. It makes your blocks lay flatter, and it alleviates a lot of bulk. I really highly recommend giving it a try, at least on a couple of blocks, see how you like it. Now, there are going to be seams that spinning and nesting aren't going to work. We will have a few of those in our block, in the future blocks. As a matter of fact, the seams here in that center piece, sorry, I'm going to peek this over. See how this seam, it's 3 pieces coming together. There's no intersection, there's no spinning that seam. So not every seam will spin, but when they can, oh, it just makes such a huge difference. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through a few of the seams, and then I'm just going to keep on sewing. Alright, so I'm getting close to that 1/4 inch. And the nice thing about the half square triangles is the 1/4 inch mark is going to intersect with that 45-degree seam. So you can stop right at that seam. And then I'm going to stop there, back stitch a couple of stitches, and then lift my needle and go ahead and sew the seam for the next row in just the same way. Now if you want to, see if I sew it this way or sew it this orientation, it doesn't matter. I kind of like having that seam up on top just as a visual place to stop and start. This is the second row in our block. So in order to spin the seams that join, we have to stop and start at the 1/4 inch at the top and the bottom. Just do your best to eyeball it. If you have one of those great machines that has a marking back here, that's wonderful. You can also mark it with a pencil if you need to. And it should be equidistant from the top and the side, right at that 1/4 inch intersection. And I am still using a scant 1/4 inch seam for everything. Again, just be consistent, whatever your decision is. Alright, I'm coming down to that 1/4 inch spot. Back stitch just 2 stitches. Or lock stitch if your machine has a lock stitch option, that's great too. And now I'm ready to get my 3rd row. Again, 1/4 inch mark, and at the flying geese, I like having that flying geese up rather than this one because I can use that 45-degree angle seam as a registration mark for stopping and starting. Right, here we go. Now let's talk a second about the thread color I'm using. I'm using white. Now, I'm not sure I'm going to be happy with the white on this red, but I didn't really want to change thread colors while making the video. I may change thread colors, but on my own, or when I'm piecing on my own and not making a video, I would, because the white on this red, I don't know, when I press that seam to the seam, I may not like it. So if I don't, I'm not going to unsew it. I'll live with it, but that is why white is in it right now, just for the sake of the video. If I were doing it and not filming a video, I would change the thread. Alright, I'm coming down to that 1/4 inch mark. Stop, back stitch, and let's see if I'm gonna like it or not. I don't know. You can kind of see that. We'll see when we get closer to the end. All right, last 2 rows. All right, I'll snip these rows apart and then sew the second seam on each of the rows, just like I did the first seams. So when I come back to you, I will have all of my rows sewn, and then we will nest the seams and sew our rows together. I'll see you in another second. All right, we are in the home stretch. I have all of my rows ready to piece together. And before I get started on that, I wanted to just give you a visual refresher of what the spun seams look like. I show it at the beginning of the video in my introduction, but it's been a while, so I thought I'd just give you a little visual refresher. This is the super sweet Ohio star that is the accent block for this month's portion of Stellar Stars. I love this little block. It's just the sweetest. I will have the instructional video for this coming up right after you finish up this, or you can skip ahead if you'd like to. But on the back you can see at the intersection for each of the 6 main blocks, plus the intersection for these quarter square triangles, I have spun my seams. The way that that works, and you'll see it as soon as I can just zoom in just a minute. Hopefully that autofocus works okay. The seams alternate in pressing direction. So up here we have a seam going to my right, then to the left. The next row it goes to the left, then the right, and then in the opposite direction on that last row. What that then allows me to do is, after stopping and starting my sewing at that 1/4 inch, this little portion right here, you can see that part where it has been stopped and started. There we go. You can see where the stop and start is right at that 1/4 inch. Because I've stopped and started there, it allows for that little intersection to open right up when I press those seams in alternating directions, and then you get this really sweet little pinwheel, and it alleviates so much bulk in your intersections. So that is what we're going to work with on assembling our rows here. So the first thing we need to do is press our seams in the directions that they'll need to go so that each seam will nest and spin. That means we need to alternate the pressing direction, starting with right, left, right, left. You can start left, right, just as long as the next row alternates in the opposite direction. So if you start with right, on the next one start with left, and so on. As long as you keep that order going, you will be just fine with nesting and spinning your seams. So I'm going to go ahead and get these kind of pushed out of my way. I am going to go ahead and start pressing these seams. I am heat setting or setting the seam, and I am going to start with this one here, and then this one kind of gently gets moved to the other side. So you can see here, this one is going to my right and this one is going to my left. And the next one will go to my right again. And I am pressing from the front. It just, for me, I prefer it because I don't get those folds happening right at the seam. That can happen sometimes. If you prefer to press from the back, feel free. I don't feel like there's really a right or wrong, just whichever works best for you. And this one is ready to sew. If you feel like your row isn't pressing flat, go ahead and give it a little bit of steam or a little bit of starch. Either way, it will help just stabilize this a little bit more. Because you've starched it already, adding a little steam will help reactivate the starch that's in it, and it will get it to lay nice and flat. So on my next row, I'm just going to make sure that I am definitely pressing the next seam in the first seam in the opposite direction of this first seam. So this one again is going to my right, that one to my left. And same on this one. I've already set all of the seams on these rows. And just because I'm right-handed, I'm going to flip that around and press that way. And give it a second sometimes just to let that heat penetrate and go through your piece. And then that one's ready to go. Double check all my seams are going in the opposite directions. And then this one, this first seam needs to go to my right. And you'll just continue this for the rest of the rows. You might notice that I am kind of using my fingernails as a little tool to just make sure I don't get any folds. Just a little thing I do. Feel free to borrow it if it works for you. Okay, last row. Alright, I think they are ready to glue baste and piece together. They look pretty nice. So when I glue baste these rows together, there's really no right or wrong way for which rows get pieced together first. You could do these two plus these two, then add on this one. You can do these two plus these two, then add on that one. It really doesn't matter, just as long as they stay in the order to make the finished block look correct. What I'd like to do is this pair and this pair, and then I'll add this one on last. So I'm going to move that off to the side. And these get glue basted just right along the seam as we did the other glue basting. It's just a longer line. So right at the inside of the 1/4 inch, or about the 1/8 of an inch mark. And you don't need a ton of glue. And if it bubbles up like mine's doing, I think I might have a little clog in there. Just kind of pull the glue so it makes a line. Okay, so this piece will go right to here, and as I'm going to start with these center 2 seams. It's always, excuse my head, it's always best when you can to align from the center out. That will help just make sure that everything aligns more evenly. And these are all nice and nested. I can feel them being nested. Then I'm going to heat set that a couple of seconds, and then that one's ready to sew. And then I will do the same here. Okay. Nest that one. Make sure it aligns from the center out and out to the corners. Now, as you are doing this, if you find that you've aligned from the center, these 2 seams here, out to the edges, if these are not the exact same size, same length, aren't aligning correctly, do your very best to get them to nest. The nesting is the most important part, because getting these intersecting seams to match up will keep your block looking nice and straight, no matter if this might be off a tad, because we can absorb any shortages inside of our seam allowance on the outside edge, but we can't realign this. So if you can get this to match, that is more important of a match than your corners out here being perfectly square. If you're having a hard time matching these two, double check for future sewing that you are staying consistent with your seam allowance width, whether it's a scant, a full 1/4 inch. As long as you are completely as consistent as humanly possible, your seams should match up pretty darn close. If they aren't matching up, do your best to align these seams here and then ease in anything that's extra happening here as best as you can. And then when we sew it and press it and after quilting, it'll be negligible. It'll hardly be noticeable, is what I'm trying to say. So getting those to match, you'll be much happier with this matching rather than stretching just to make a straight seam. And a lot of those discrepancies will be absorbed in seam allowances or they will quilt out. So let's heat set this. And now these two are ready to sew. What I'm going to do here is set up my sewing machine. Oh, that looks kind of cool, doesn't it? Like that. Maybe we made it a bonus design. Take out that middle one. You have a really cool rectangular pattern. I kind of like that. So what we're going to do now, or what I'll go ahead and do and you'll do, is sew our seams here. These two seams you just sew straight across. You don't need to stop at any intersections, just from one end to the other. You don't have to backstitch here because these outside edges will be pieced to our sashings. If you want to stop and start at a 1/4 inch, you certainly can, but you don't necessarily have to. I think that is one place where you don't need to spend your time. But all the way through, and then these will be ready to press and spin, and we'll be able to add on this section. So what I'm going to do is head over to my machine, sew this straight through, and then I'll come back and show you my sewing and do the rest of the pressing, and we'll have this assembled really quickly. Well, I've got these 2 rows sewn together and these 2 rows sewn together. I'll give you a closer look at the seam itself. It just goes straight through from one end to the other. I did not stop and start at any of the intersections, meaning these areas, and they are ready to press. When I press these, I'm going to set the seam and then open it up. And just real quick though, I do want to point out, when you are piecing these rows together, just be sure to watch your foot on the machine, that it doesn't push back or push forward the seams on top or on bottom, so that they stay nested. Just be aware of that as you're going. There are little ways to fix that if it happens, so you don't have to unsew everything, but just be aware of that if as you go. So here we are. It is time to pop our little intersections open. So this seam here goes to the left, this one goes to the right. So that means, like a pinwheel, this goes this way, that is going to go down, that one stays going that way, and this will go up. And these will all alternate in that same way. This one going this way, so this seam has to go down, across, up, and so on. So in order to open up, you'll see that stopping and starting at that 1/4 inch allows this to just kind of almost naturally open up. If there's any glue in there, just pop it open with your fingernails or a little stiletto and it will open up so nice and sweet. So it'll open up just like that. On the next one here, same thing. See how I just kind of pushed it open and get the glue out of the way, and then that one will open up. And the same down here, that one will open up, and they are ready to press. So to press them, open this one up. I do give it a little bit of a press in that intersection from the back first, just to kind of tell it what to do, boss it around a bit, get it to go the direction that I want it to go. And after I push those down a little bit with the tip of my iron, then I flip it over and just make sure that each seam here goes in the direction it needs to be pressed. So this one kind of gets pressed more down, this one more up, down, down. So there's no folds in the intersection, or sorry, there's no folds along the seams, making the actual block draw in smaller. We want to make sure it stays as accurate to size as possible. And then the next one is ready to do the same thing. Oh, hey, take a look at this. This is a good example. So see here how my foot grabbed that little bit of fabric right there and pushed it back. This isn't as big a deal if it were the entire seam. I want to show you how you can fix it without unsewing that whole section. So basically what I do, I take a sharp little pair of snippy scissors and I snip that fabric really close to the seam line and then push it back in the direction it should go. Give it a little press, and then I don't have to unsew to fix that. And it works. That works really well when it is a larger fold over as well. So let me push these guys down like I did before. All right, now we're ready to join that center portion to each of these sides. I'll join it to one side and then the other, and then we'll spin the seams and the block will be finished. So let's get that glue basted just the same as we did before. Now if you want to hop over an intersection so you don't have as much glue in there, you certainly can. I don't mind popping it open, but it's up to you. All right, get this guy in its place. Make sure it is going the right way. It looks like with this one, either direction works just fine. So nest from the center out. Make sure those are good and set. And then the ones on the outside. See, if I start in a corner and something is just even a 1/16 of an inch off and I try and match it up all the way one direction or another, it might make everything off. So as with quilting, you know, a little bit plus a little bit plus a little bit equals a lot. So if I start from that center out, then any of those little tiny measurement indiscrepancies or discrepancies, excuse me, will kind of disappear or just be managed and won't show up so much. So I'll go ahead and piece this together, and then I will press it, piece this piece together, and I will be back with you to show you the final pressing and take a look at our wonderful block. After sewing this seam here to join that middle section to the previous 2 rows, I pressed each of the intersections of the seam in opposite directions, so you have each of those intersecting seams spinning around, and I've just sewn that final row together. So next up and finally is to open up each of these intersections, press that last seam, and then your entire block will be finished. So just like we did on those previous rows that I walked you through, we're just going to open those little seams up a bit, and as you work with it, you'll get the hang of it, and it really does go pretty quickly. But man, the results are, I think the results are worth even those few extra seconds of preparation. And then press in those areas just to get it to go the way I want it to. Flip it on over, and I press from the front. Again, you can press from the back to get that initial pressing, and then kind of finish it from the front to make sure you don't have any folds of fabric, which again would draw in your block and make it smaller than you really would want it to be. And I think it looks fantastic. I hope that yours turned out just as good as you had hoped and imagined. To finish off the block, I'm just going to give it a light spray of starching and pull off any little linty pieces that you might find. That little one won't stay there. a light spray. And light, I really do mean light. You don't need much. Give it a second or two to kind of soak in so it doesn't evaporate just as soon as you press your iron to it. And just gently go over each of the blocks and intersections to make sure they're pressed the way that you want them to be. And it helps all those points to lay nice and flat. And I think it looks pretty great. I hope yours does too. I'm sure it does. And I can't wait to see pictures. Please post them in our Facebook group. Share them on Instagram. We'll have a little Stellar Stars quilt along hashtag going on with that too. I will post that. It would just be Stellar Stars QAL with hashtag, of course. We'll just keep sharing and supporting each other. And I really just love being a part of this quilting community and having you be a part of it with me. Next up is going to be that cute little Ohio star. A lot of the skills that I'm going to show you here, you have learned from doing this block. The new skill will be using that Fons and Porter half and quarter square triangle ruler to get these little guys cut out, and sewing those together to get those seams to nest and intersect. Otherwise, it's a lot like what we just did here, same size blocks, 2.5 inches. And I think that you're going to really enjoy this. It's a fun block to use in other quilts as well. Once you've got these two made, you're all set for January and your first month of the Stellar Stars block of the month. And next month, we will have a brand new block for you. Please make sure you let me know if you have any questions along the way. Our Facebook group or email, both are great ways to get in touch with me. And just thank you so, so much for being with me. Happy quilting and happy sewing, and I will see you again soon.